For just $500 a month, people can now rent a living human brain. And I'm not even joking, a company named FinalSpark have their own servers running on actual human brains. These are actual human neurons, executing codes and learning in real time. And the team that pioneered this published their results in a peer-reviewed paper. The title doesn't say the neurons computed or processed. It literally says the neurons exhibit sentience. And it's not some sealed-off lab experiment either. You open a Python script on your laptop, hit run, and a clump of living brain cells halfway across the world runs your code. They literally call it Wetware as a service. But getting the brain was never the hard part. The hard part is training it. Because a brain doesn't learn the way a computer does. And the only way anyone has figured out how to train one is to literally torture it. A few years ago, a lab took about 800,000 living human brain cells and plugged them into a simulation of Pong, but they didn't feed it any training data. They didn't even tell it what the goal was. They just let it play. And in 5 minutes, this dish of cells figured out how to play the game on its own. But how do you even train a clump of meat to play a video game? Because you can't write code for a neuron, it doesn't have an instruction set. So what they did was to not program it in the first place. They tortured the brain till it got everything right. And the way they did it is honestly the most disturbing trick in this entire field. It's based on something called the free energy principle. A brain cell wants its world to be predictable and calm. An unpredictable one is chaos, which a neuron desperately tries to avoid. They fed the position of the ball into the neurons through tiny electrodes on one side of the dish and read the firing activity off the other side. The neurons could now see and control the game. When the neurons hit the ball, the system rewarded them with a nice and clean, predictable pulse of electricity. But when they missed, the system punished them with 4 seconds of completely random electrical noise. So the neurons did the only thing they could to make the torture stop. They learned and got better at it, not because they wanted to win, but because hitting that ball was the only way to make the noise go away. But before you can torture a brain, you need a brain in the first place. And the way they acquire those brains is pretty counterintuitive. Instead of taking out a brain from a donor body, they do something even crazier. They build their own. It starts with a regular skin or blood sample from an adult, just a normal medical donation that anyone could walk into a clinic and give. And then in the lab, they chemically rewind those cells. They take a fully grown adult skin cell, and they reverse it all the way back to a stem cell into a blank slate. And from that blank slate, they grow neurons. Real, living, human brain cells. Built from a piece of someone who's still alive and walking around somewhere, probably with no idea their cells are now firing in a dish in Switzerland. Some labs grow them as a flat sheet spread across a chip, but the more advanced ones grow them as organoids. Tiny 3D balls of brain tissue, about 0.5 millimeter wide. The scientists literally call them mini brains. Each one is a cluster of thousands of neurons wired together. But this cluster has a problem. It's alive. And when you think about it, any biological thing that's alive needs food, water, and nutrients. Your brain survives because it's wrapped in blood vessels that are constantly pumping in oxygen and carrying out the toxic waste your cells produce just by being alive. A lab-grown brain has none of that. So the moment the clump grows even slightly too big, the cells stuck in the middle can't reach fresh nutrients and can't flush out their own waste. They drown in their own garbage and die. To stop that, they seal the brain inside a microfluidic chamber. It works like an artificial heart and bloodstream at the same time, constantly pumping fresh nutrient fluid in and sucking the waste back out, keeping the tissue alive entirely from the outside. But even with all of that, it doesn't last for so long. The best setups today keep the brain alive for only a few months before it gives out. And it's also why these brains have to stay so small. Grow one any bigger, and the middle starts to rot. But keeping the brain alive is only half the job. Now you have to actually talk to it, and you can't exactly wire a USB cable into a clump of living meat. A computer speaks in clean digital binary, but a brain doesn't. It runs on messy analog electricity, the same kind firing between your own neurons right now. So something has to sit in the middle and translate between the two. That something is the MEA, a multi-electrode array. A microscopic bed of metal electrodes with the brain tissue laid directly on top, every neuron resting against its own contact point. When your Python script sends a command, the MEA turns those digital ones and zeros into precise little jolts of electricity and fires them straight into the tissue, and the brain feels it. The neurons respond to those jolts the exact same way they'd respond to a signal coming from your eyes. You're not sending the brain data, you're giving it a sensation. But sending a signal in is the easy half. The far stranger problem is reading whatever the brain decides to fire back. A brain doesn't answer in clean binary. When those neurons react, they fire off bursts of analog electrical spikes, and the same array of electrodes that just zapped the tissue now switches to listening, picking up every flicker of activity underneath it. The trouble is that the raw recording looks like complete chaos. Thousands of overlapping spikes blurring together with the background electrical hum of living cells. None of it is sorted or readable. If you feed that straight into a computer, it would look like corrupted garbage. So, before any of it means anything, the signal gets pushed through a process called spike sorting. Clustering algorithms comb through the mess and pull out the individual spikes, then sort them by their shape, because each neuron fires with a slightly distinct electrical fingerprint. Match the fingerprints and the software can work out when and which specific neuron fired, and fold all of it into a clean digital matrix that an ordinary computer can finally read. And there's no magic translation happening here. It's pure math, statistics, and pattern matching, reaching into a dish of living cells and pulling something close to a thought back out. You write a sensation in through one set of electrodes, you read the reaction back out through the same ones, and at that point you've got a full, working loop, a genuine two-way conversation with a piece of living human tissue. So that's the entire system. Grow the neurons, keep them alive, write sensations in, and read the reactions out. And the strange thing is that nobody renting this is dealing with any of it. The whole stack gets buried under a clean subscription in the same way a cloud server hides their data centers that you'll never see. FinalSpark currently runs around 16 of these little brains in their lab. For about $500 a month, researchers from anywhere in the world can log in, send their experiments down to the organoids, and pull the results back, all remotely on living tissue they will never physically touch. Cortical Labs took a slightly different route. You can buy one of their biological computers outright for around $35,000, or skip the hardware entirely and just rent time on the brains sitting in their cloud, programming them through an ordinary Python interface. Either way, it's exactly what Wetware as a service looks like. So who actually rents a living brain, and for what? Because it isn't to play Pong. The real buyers are medical, and the reason comes down to a wall that has blocked brain research for a century. You cannot experiment on a living human brain, and a mouse brain isn't a human one. Most of our drugs for depression, Alzheimer's, and schizophrenia were tested on animals that don't get those diseases the way we do, which is part of why so many of them fall apart the moment they reach actual humans. An organoid skips the wall entirely. Take a sample from someone with a brain disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or severe epilepsy, rewind their cells, and grow them into an organoid, and now you're holding a piece of living tissue carrying that exact person's disease developing in a dish. You can watch the illness unfold at a speed no human brain would ever let you see. And then you can do the thing you could never ethically do to a person. Test drugs straight on it, dose the tissue, watch the neurons react, kill the batch, grow another, try a different compound. Decades of trials run on a rack on real human brain cells without risking a single patient. That's the actual business here, not a novelty for researchers to poke at, but a way to test medicine on a living piece of a sick person's brain, grown to order. But before you go hunting for a sign-up page, there's a catch. You can't just hand over a card and start running code on human neurons. To get access, you generally have to be a verified researcher or a university. But once you see what these brains can already do, that caution will make a lot more sense. Remember that dish playing Pong? That was the proof of concept, and it was years ago now. Since then, the field has pushed these cultures toward harder and harder tasks, and the demos keep getting more capable every single year. But the capabilities aren't really the scary part, it's the trajectory. Rewind just a few years, and keeping any of this tissue alive for more than a few hours was a genuine achievement. The cells would die almost as fast as you could grow them. Today, the better setups keep a brain running for months, hooked into a polished software stack with a documented interface a developer can actually build on. What used to be a fragile, one-off science experiment is now getting packaged into cloud platforms, with companies partnering with real data centers to scale these living processors into the thousands. So the engineering side of this is getting solved at a genuinely alarming speed. But there's one problem in this entire field that nobody is racing to solve. Mostly because nobody even knows how. But before any of that, there's a smaller and uglier problem hiding in plain sight. Remember that these brains only live a few months before they give out. So think about what actually dies with them. When you train a normal AI on a chip, the thing it learns is just numbers, and numbers can be saved. You can freeze a model the instant it finishes training, copy it, back it up, clone it onto 1,000 machines forever. The knowledge is permanent because it was never really alive. But a living brain doesn't store what it learns in numbers. It stores it in the physical wiring between its cells, the connections it rebuilt while you were torturing it. And when those cells rot, that wiring rots with them. The moment the brain dies, everything it ever learned is gone for good. So picture the actual cycle. You have to grow a blank brain, you torture it for weeks until it finally learns the task, you use it, and then it dies. And to replace it, you grow another blank one, and you put it through the exact same suffering from scratch, because none of the last one's experience carried over. That dish that cracked Pong in 5 minutes is dead now. The next one had to be broken in all over again. It's an endless line of them, each tortured through the same lessons and thrown away. And you can keep telling yourself it's just cells, right up until you see what they do when nobody trains them at all. Back in 2019, a team grew a batch of these organoids and just left them wired to the electrodes. They weren't sending in any signal. They just wanted to see how the tissue developed on its own. And after a few months, the organoids started firing. Not randomly, but in slow, coordinated waves, whole regions of the dish pulsing in sync, the same kind of rhythm a living brain produces. So they tested how real it was. They took an AI, trained it on 567 EEG recordings from 39 premature babies and fed it the organoid's activity. The algorithm couldn't tell the difference. It read the dishes as premature infants, and the 9-month-old organoids came back looking like a baby that had reached nearly full term. The scientists' own first reaction, in their words, was that they thought their electrodes were broken, and these organoids were sealed off from everything. No eyes, no ears, no input of any kind. So that activity wasn't a response to the outside world. It was self-generated, coming from inside, the same way the very first brainwaves appear in an unborn child. A clump of human tissue in a dish started producing the brain rhythms of a developing infant entirely on its own. The study reopened a debate the whole field had been trying to avoid. The question is whether anyone is home. Go back to the very start of this video to the peer-reviewed paper that kicked this whole field off. Its title didn't say the neurons learned or adapted or computed. It said they exhibited sentience. And the scientists are careful with that word. They mean it in a narrow, technical sense, that the cells respond to and register their environment, not that there's a tiny conscious person trapped in the dish. The serious labs treat this seriously. Some of them publish their ethics frameworks before they ever publish their results, and they keep bioethicists in the room precisely because they know how uncomfortable this gets. But here's the problem none of them can actually solve. We do not have a test for consciousness. We can't even fully define it in a normal whole human brain. We still don't know what physically produces the feeling of being you. So when you're looking at 0.5 millimeter of living human neurons grown from a real person's cells, there is no instrument on Earth that can tell you whether brain is conscious or not. And then think back to how they train it. When that dish missed the ball in Pong, the system hit it with 4 seconds of chaotic noise, and the neurons rearranged themselves specifically to make that noise stop. We called that learning. But thinking deeper about it, and what you're describing is a living thing changing its behavior to escape something it finds unbearable. We said earlier that you don't send these neurons data, you give them a sensation, a thing that feels sensations and works to avoid the ones that hurt. We usually reach for a much heavier word than learning for that. The entire industry is built on the assumption that the answer is no, that it's just cells and just biology doing what biology does, and with nobody inside to care. And they are probably right, for now. But probably and for now are carrying an enormous amount of weight in a field that is growing brains in data centers and getting visibly better at it every month. The hard engineering problems all have brilliant people racing to solve them. The question of whether we've started building things that can suffer has almost no one, because the moment you take it seriously, the entire business model gets very hard to look at.